Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Even Better podcast. This is Sinikka Waugh, and I am so delighted to introduce you to my guest today, Kim Gratny. Kim, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Sinikka.
Folks, as you're listening to Kim, Kim is a new acquaintance of mine, and what a warmth to my heart. It has been just a joy to get to know Kim and to visit with her. And we're going to be talking about something that is really, really powerful today, right? You know, those of you who've listened for a long time know that leadership and making our workdays better is part of who I am and what I do. And today we're going to talk about 5 ways to rethink leadership through the lens of serving. And I just am so excited about this because so often many of our listeners I know are finding themselves in corporate settings or in corporate America. And it's always a delight when we get to step out of that just a little bit and hear other perspectives that apply fully to what we're doing in our day jobs in corporate or in small business or all over the world, but hear it from a different perspective. So let me tell you just a little bit about Kim. So Kim Gratny, she is just a delight to know. If you have the opportunity to spend time with her, she's thoughtful and she's considerate. And even in her communication style, as I've had the opportunity to get to know her, I can tell that when we're talking, she's fully present in that moment and she's listening. And she has served in a variety of industries all over with really looking at the concepts of trust and of confidence. And right now, she is specializing in horse-guided coaching. So this is new for me. You're going to learn about this alongside me in this conversation. But horse-guided coaching is part of where she is specializing today that really helps with mentoring and coaching and leadership development. I'm just so excited. Kim, I'm going to have you tell us a little bit about your story and without me telling any more, because I'm just going to get it wrong. So tell us a little bit about how you got into horse-guided coaching and what that means for those of us who don't know.
Well, thank you, Sinikka, so much. I'm so humbled by and grateful for this opportunity today and really appreciate the chance to just bring a different perspective about leadership. So the short version of how I got into this is that I've always been that horse-crazed girl. However, I had a lot of fear with just how large horses are. And from a riding perspective, I had a lot of fear about letting go of control and being willing to go fast, right, on horses. And that really showed up later in my life when I took a side trip to spend about 6 years working at my family's cattle operation in southern Iowa, where everything is done by horseback. And so in order to be a viable member of that team instead of a liability, I had to step into huge amounts of discomfort because we were horseback on thousands of acres, 25 miles from any civilization whatsoever, and cell service not even present in some of those pastures. And it was a huge life lesson about letting go of control, building trust with my horses to do a job. And at that time, it was more about just getting the job done than building relationship with my horses. And when I re-entered life, if you will, after that side trip of working in rural space and so forth, what I recognized was how much I had learned in that 6 years that I didn't even realize how impactful it was while it was occurring. But then afterward, reflecting back on it and really being blown away with, wow, I learned more about relationships in that 6 years. And what the 6 years taught me was that I had a relationship with the horses in a way that would allow me to get a job done, but not establishing myself as a leader of my horse herd in a way that had us partnering. So, and he started to challenge me with my old school thoughts regarding horsemanship and working with horses. And I recognized that the leadership lessons that I was learning could possibly be helpful to others in urban spaces. And so I pursued certification in equine assisted learning, now retermed horse guided coaching, so that with the hope, Sinikka, with the hope and the dream that these amazing, majestic creatures could also be learning partners for others who may not think about what we can learn from the animal kingdom because they're in a more urban environment. And so there began my journey into this realm. So our coaching does not involve any writing because so much of the foundation we lay with our horse learning partners happens with everybody's feet on the ground.
That's so wonderful. And your program is a full circle creative coaching, and you're based out of Earlham, Iowa. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. We'll get to learn more about that and see how folks can connect with you. As we talk about this, so we'll segue right into the topic. So the topic is 5 ways to rethink leadership through the lens of serving. And I love the idea that perhaps we're not throwing away things that we already knew, but we're just rethinking. We're spending some time reconsidering, thinking about it again, getting our head in that space based on these wonderful lessons that you've learned and that you've continued to learn as you're running your business. So let's dive right in. The first one, as you look at 5 ways to rethink leadership, Kim, you've shared that think before speaking is one of your first ways. Let's talk about that. Thinking before speaking. And you take that even further. I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you. So for anyone who has known me maybe previously, they might laugh at the notion that I could even think of thinking before I speak, because I love people and I love sharing. But in the second half of life that I'm now in, I'm recognizing that we were given one mouth and 2 ears for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at this first quality of think before speaking, it's really about recognizing that it's okay to not know it all and to not appear to know it all or think that we have so much to share. And so many of our conversations, in fact, I just had one this morning that was so painful because the person on the other end of the phone just had this agenda that she had to make sure that I got. And I found that instead of trying to counter all of her points, if I listened quietly and very presently and attentively, that after she made her numerous points, if I could come back with a simple, powerful, thought-provoking question, that we'd get a little further in the conversation than if it just became this back and forth of, who was trying to make a point and whose point was better and whose point was bigger, if you will. But it's hard to think before we speak because we live in a society where people won't stop talking. And there was a great book about that called Quiet, and I'm forgetting the author at the moment, but quiet for people, introverts who are in a world that can't stop talking, right? But it's hard to do because it requires us to be vulnerable. And a lot of us aren't okay. We're uncomfortable with silence, right? How many of us are in meetings and conversations and family gatherings and work gatherings and events? Silence is awkward, but the cool thing is it's only awkward if 2 people make it awkward. If one is willing to sit in it and absorb it, it's transformational.
Absolutely.
And so I want to encourage people to rethink even what they think about silence.
Absolutely. I think Susan Cain's Quiet was just really a powerful opportunity to think about silence a little differently. Kim, when you were sharing some of these topics in advance and as we were planning for this conversation, one of the things you said about thinking before speaking that really struck my heart was take each thought captive. And that was such a powerful phrase. I would love it if you would just share the source for that thought, or how did that become part of your conversation as you're thinking about thinking before speaking?
Yeah, that's a great opportunity, Sinikka. Thank you to further unpack that. And I think what it really boils down to, which is really hard to hear, I know at least it was hard for me to hear the first, several hundred times, but it was the fact that we desensitize others to our voices because we talk so much. And so we create a lot of clutter that really doesn't need to be, and it makes things harder. And so I'm recovering a lot of things. One of them is making things harder than they need to be, gal. And so when we think about what is it that really needs to be said?
Mm.
And so in that, for me, it's a prayerful pause, but maybe for others, it's simply a pause. That pause of, does this really need to be said? Does this really need to be said now? And if so, how will I say it in as few words as possible so that ultimately I mean what I say and I say what I mean? Another way to think of it is my yes means yes and my no means no.
Mhm.
That's a very uncomfortable place for us as a society because no sounds harsh and yes means yes and all these other things. And of course in the setting of improv, yes and is beautiful, but it doesn't always have to mean yes and 33 other things,
Right.
right? And our no can be no. That's a one word sentence in and of itself, a very hard sentence for people to stand on solid ground with. I get that as well. And I love that you do too, but it's okay. And
Mm.
our tone and our way that we deliver it can be kind, but we just think we need to fill space.
Yeah. So as I'm listening to you, Kim, as you're describing this thinking before speaking and how that ties to the lens of serving, right? It's not serving ourselves, it's serving others, it's serving the audience, it's looking for what they need in that moment, not what we need.
Yes, and it's that lens of not thinking we have any clue what they need, but being willing to humble ourselves and quiet ourselves enough to be curious about what those needs are. And so the older I get, the less I know, and I am so
Mm.
grateful.
Lovely. Lovely. So, for those of you who've just joined us, this is the Even Better podcast, and we're here with Kim Gratny, and we're talking about 5 ways to rethink leadership through the lens of serving. She's just shared some insight on thinking before speaking and taking each thought captive. So, the second point is when asking for something, see it through. All right, you're going to have to unpack that one, Kim. What do you mean by this? When asking for something, see it through.
Thank you. Great question. This one is really, really challenging because, again, we live in a time where we are so blessed with abundance. And so our asks are typically made as we rush from one thing to another or rush through something. And it really requires what I know you're going to cover a little bit later, but I'll give it a teaser if I may. It requires us to slow down, to be really clear with our asks. And so what happens is, and I think everybody can relate to it, whether it's with a child, an animal, a coworker, whomever it is, we make an ask. We don't even stick around long enough to see what happens as a result of our ask. And then the end result doesn't appear as we expected it to or had an agenda in our minds. It doesn't look like we thought it would. And then we get frustrated and then there's some discord because we're asking some questions, or maybe we're not even asking questions. We're just making assumptions that somebody didn't do something a certain way, yet we haven't stayed present in the ask and we haven't been willing to see it through. And so what I want to encourage, Sinikka, is be willing to spend as much time as needed while being patient, persistent, and grace filled as people need, right? Because it's our own agendas and our own rushing that put a damper on that. And this is my favorite part. If you're unwilling to be patient and persistent and grace filled, skip the ask altogether. Just don't even bother. And a lot of us, myself included, another thing I'm recovering from is just one more thing. I want to get just one more thing done. And that one more thing might be an ask of myself or of someone else. But again, as I hurry to get one more thing done before I need to leave or attend to something else, I'm setting myself up for poor relationships by continuing to think I can squeeze one more thing. And when I say poor relationships, I mean with myself as well as with others. So when we're unwilling to give that time and that persistence and that patience and that grace, Sinikka, our ask loses value. Because the more we ask for insignificant stuff, like the little stuff that really doesn't matter, think of how people might be micromanaged.
Yeah.
When there is repeated asks for little things, we miss the significant asks
Yeah.
because we've been over asked, right? So back to that first point about desensitizing people to our voices, we also over ask a lot of the little nitpicky things. And then those critical asks, when those critical asks happen, people are burnt out and their willingness to answer the critical asks isn't there.
Yeah. Oh, I can see this. So I'm tying this back to the theme here, which is the 5 ways to rethink leadership through the lens of serving. And this whole idea about being willing to see it through. So to ask more slowly, to ask with the patience and the persistence and the grace to see it through and to see it to the conclusion. It's going to give a couple of things. If I'm hearing you right, one of the things it's going to give is that person will have a chance to process and to understand and to hear and to ask clarifying questions, so that at the end we get a better response than we would have if we just dumped and run. But I wonder, is there also something there about those people who do love to serve and they do love to respond to an ask with a yes, absolutely? If we pause and we ask and we see it all the way through, we serve them by giving them that opportunity to serve and to connect with us and to really share their results.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and thank you for reminding us of the lens of serving. How interested are you in an example that I think we see all the time that we may not recognize is a beautiful illustration of this very point and of what you just reiterated?
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you. So how many times do we see a human and a dog walking and the dog is in front of the human? So essentially it's humans getting walked by their dogs. I mean, we've been there, we've all seen it, right? Well, when we see that person holding the leash and the dog's at the end of the leash and the dog, right, is out front of that human, that tension on that leash is actually, that leash is the ask. Whatever the dog's name is, Otis, follow me, walk with me. And when that leash is taut or there's tension on it, that dog is disregarding. That ask has meant nothing. The ask is being disregarded. And because if the ask was being respected and honored, that dog would be beside us or behind us.
Yeah.
But what happens is the dog goes out front, the leash is taut, and the human then doesn't hold the dog accountable. And I do want to clarify something. When I say that dog is disrespecting that owner, I want to be really careful about that, because Sinikka, when we're looking through something through the lens of service, we can sometimes bring a lot of emotion to, well, I'm being disrespected and that's not okay. And that's not really what I mean. That's going to happen, right? That's part of leadership. We're not always going to earn people's respect. But again, putting aside those feelings and emotions about being disrespected, clouds our thinking. And so if we can think about, oh gosh, if my ask is not clear and I'm not holding that dog accountable and I am not getting some slack in that leash, how can I help the dog want to follow me? And how can I make this more about what's in the best interest of the dog, not just me getting my exercise, right?
Right.
Or the obligatory, my dog needs to, go out, so I'm just going to let it go. There's so much value and beauty that can come from being purposeful with that time in relationship building with the dog.
Yeah. And it's about being present in that moment and in being present in the mutual relationship. Not by contrast, if the dog was behind me and I was tugging on the leash and it was digging in all fours or just being dragged around on its feet, that's not good either. It's that relationship. How can we walk through this together and pausing to think about how this ask will be meaningful and beneficial to the person of whom I'm asking.
Yes, because if we put that then in the context of a 1,200-pound horse,
Yeah.
and you're, and people are out here at our place and they're engaging in this experiential learning with that 1,200-pound horse, an unclear ask, the visual that I'd like listeners to get, Sinikka, is that unclear ask looks like getting dragged around behind the horse. And so what comes to mind is road rash, right?
Right.
So the stakes are higher with a horse. And that's one of the many reasons that we choose horses as our learning partners instead of dogs, because any dog, even the largest breed, we can force to do what we're asking. Horses, speaking from experience, not so much, doesn't turn out well. And if you're interested in that story, that could be for another time.
Yep. Love it. Love it. Well, I'm going to keep us moving. So we've got 5 ways to rethink leadership through the lens of serving. First one was thinking before speaking. The second one was when you're asking for something, see it through. Let's move to the third one. So actively observe with eyes, ears, and mind, right? Observation is a total body experience. Talk to us about how that plays out through your experiential learning that happens in your business.
Thank you. Yes, I would love to. This one is a really, really hard one because our minds trick us into thinking we've seen what we want to see. And so, as I've been in this space for the last handful of years, bringing this experiential learning model to the central Iowa market, I have caught even myself wanting someone to succeed so much with this activity, with their hands-on activity with the horse, that I have found myself watching and thinking I've seen the release of the pressure that they've applied with the ask, right? So asking your horse for something is applying pressure, and we are led to keep asking until it occurs. So until the ask occurs, we need to keep applying that pressure. And that is super hard for people to want to do. In fact, there was a client here recently who is just an awesome, courageous client, one of my favorites, if you will, because of his effort. But he gets really uncomfortable when the ask is not attended to by the horse right away. And his tendency is to abandon the ask and stop asking and just go hug the horse. And we are able to laugh about it because, I'll say, wait a minute, what happened? You abandoned the ask. And he's like, I know, because I feel bad that I continue to ask and he's just not getting it. And I'm sure it's because I'm not asking clearly, but this is hard. And I just want to be close to the horse for a minute, which is awesome. But when we release the ask before the action occurs, we're actually rewarding the wrong behavior.
I see that.
Right? So we have to be super present in the moment to watch for that ask to be honored and then release the pressure of the ask. And if we don't see that, if we're distracted and we don't see the very moment when that ask is heard and listened to, and then the action is taken, we have missed it. And when we make continual asks and those asks are honored and we don't release the pressure in a timely manner, we build resentment.
Yeah. I was applying this in my own head, having absolutely no experience with horses whatsoever, to teenagers, and the ask of, will you clean your room? Clean your room, not would you want to clean your room, but clean your room or clean your bathroom or whatever the ask is. And if you release at the point where the teenager says, yeah, I will, but before the actual action has taken place, there's going to be frustration there, right? Because there's the nod, there's the, yeah, mom, don't nag me, I'll clean my bathroom or I'll clean my bedroom or whatever. But then you have to ask again because the action didn't actually take place.
Yes. And so here's a moment of transparency, right? Not proud of this, but also hoping I'm not the only one out there. But in my previous space before this lens, showed up in my life and I really began to study it and attempt to live it, Sinikka, I was absolutely one of those moms that would get so frustrated that my ask hadn't been honored that I would just go do it myself, which removed the learning opportunity. And I can tell from your response, you did not join me in that space. So good for you.
No, I just yelled until it got done.
Right. So it didn't mean anything because they knew that if they waited long enough, God bless them all, but they knew if they waited long enough, I just couldn't stand to look at it anymore. And I would just go do it. Look at all the learning moments that I took away. Right. So if any of my adult kids are listening to this, I'm sure they are doubled over laughing and nodding. So anyway.
That's fun. All right. We got to get to number 4 here. So
Yes.
5 ways to rethink leadership through the lens of serving. We talked about thinking before speaking. When you ask, see it through, actively observe with ears, eyes, and mind. And then number 4, slow down to speed up. Okay. This is crazy, crazy hard for me. You have to educate, teach, share your insights. How did you get here? Slow down to speed up.
So we actually got that phrase from some leaders or influencers who have been out here. And when we've asked them, what is one discovery or learning moment that you had while you were here invested in this experiential learning endeavor? they shared how they realized that slowing down is actually going to help them speed up. And we hope that it's the notion of slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Because what we see is that when we are slow, things make so much more sense. And then we practice the slowness, thereby facilitating or fostering smoothness. And then smoothness is what we rely on when things are a little speedier in our businesses. But what's happening is we don't slow down enough to learn the smooth to then be able to call on the smooth once things show up. And so when people are here engaging in this experiential learning with the horse herd, we're in a controlled environment. We're in an enclosed pasture or an enclosed arena where we can learn to be slow and effective and smooth so that when we leave the pasture, when we leave the arena and we go back to our workplaces, we've started to build some of that muscle memory of how to make an ask, how to communicate so that we can apply that learning. So that's why it's really essential for leaders to make the time and space to coach team members before it really matters. And oftentimes we're waiting to try to coach people and lead people in those critical moments with those critical asks. And we haven't laid the foundation so that when it really matters, it's happening. So horses give us that front row seat into the concepts that we're talking about. And they give us the opportunity to see how well the principles and the beliefs and the values of our leadership can be applied so that we can rethink what's ineffective in our workplaces and make them more effective.
Yep. So have you always known this, the slow down to speed up?
Oh my word. No, ma'am. In fact, if you knew how long it took me to even understand and get the words in order, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, it was comical. When I look back and reflect, Sinikka, on how long it took me to even state the words in the right order, I can't even tell you how long that took. I'm too embarrassed. It was a long time, for the person, the leader teaching me that. I know that they were like, wow, I mean, how many times do we have to go over this? But sticking with it and being willing to see it through and really taking it literally and applying it to my life, both personally and professionally. Now I laugh at, gosh, this makes so much sense. And it's so simple, it's silly.
So there's hope for people like me who
Of
go careening
course.
through. If this is not natural, this is a skill we can learn.
Thank you. Thank you. That is one word that I hope people leave with, is that these are skills. So it's all about skills. These are all learnable skills.
Nice. Well, let's quick get to that last one here. We're talking about 5 ways to rethink leadership through the lens of serving. Think before speaking. When asking for something, see it through. Actively observe with eyes, ears, and mind. Slow down to speed up. And then this last one is really interesting. Avoid self-preservation. Kim, tell me about that. Especially like I've got this mental picture of you being out in an arena with a herd of horses, and avoid self-preservation feels a bit counterintuitive to me. Talk me through this.
Thank you once again. I love your word choice, Sinikka, of counterintuitive, because that's exactly the word we love that captures all of this, right? This is totally counter to what society tells us. It's counter to what our ego tells us. And it is going against what our own thoughts often lead us toward. And so the best way for me to illustrate this point quickly as we move toward wrapping up is that one of our favorite experiences with teams and individuals who come out here is an activity that asks them to go behind a horse. And so often people come to us that have had horse experience, maybe as a child, maybe as an adult. And that is one of the biggest counterintuitive things that people are really surprised by. But we do that activity because of what it stands for. And that is being vulnerable enough to build trust to then be able to lead effectively. And so often when something is difficult and causes discomfort, we want to think in terms of, how am I going to preserve self? We forget about the fact that it's actually more about what's in another's best interest, right? And so when we think about only ourselves and we think about preserving ourselves, that makes us less vulnerable. And then trust is compromised. And then when trust is compromised, the willingness to follow is also compromised. And so followers are such a crucial element to leadership. And one of my favorite lines is that humans are the only species willing to follow ineffective leaders. This does not happen in the animal kingdom. How fascinating.
How fascinating. And yet we do it as humans all the time.
We do. And we also know from an organizational standpoint, Sinikka, that people don't leave companies.
Right.
People leave ineffective leaders.
We follow them for some time and then we go. Fascinating. Well, I know there is a lot more to unpack here, and in the interest of time, we're not going to be able to do much more, but people can reach out to you and can get in touch with you. Certainly if any of our listeners want to reach out to you through us, they're welcome to reach out. We will connect you happily. Is there another way that you'd like them to connect with you, perhaps on LinkedIn or email or your website? Kim, how can they reach you if they want to learn more?
Yes, thank you so much. So the power of three, I love that. The website, Seek, S as in Sam, EEK, fullcircle.com. So seeking, right? Seeking the opportunity to come full circle with our leadership and our relationships. So seekfullcircle.com. Kim at seekfullcircle.com is a great place via email. My preferred method, I'm an old-fashioned gal, second half of life. I love conversation. So I would love to just have a phone call from people who have questions, and I'd love to just listen to their questions and see what might be helpful and how looking at leadership through the lens of serving is possible. So my number, 515-229-0429.
Thank you, Kim. So you have just brought us through just a wonderful insight into 5 ways to rethink leadership through the lens of serving. And I thank you for that. You've brought a very different perspective, and yet so relatable, so understandable. Thank you for making the time to share this. And I'm interested in learning more, and I know that our listeners are as well. But I can't let you go without asking this question. So what's making you even better these days, Kim?
Well, thank you. I love the question. I love that you asked all of your podcast participants this question. And really, Sinikka, one thing that is making me even better is trying to live congruently with the 5 qualities associated with leading by serving. It's the example that our Creator sets for us and how our family and businesses hope that we are showing up in life. And the key word there being try.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, Kim, thank you so much. This has been an absolute joy. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for this blessed opportunity, Sinikka. It is so appreciated.
Absolutely. This has been great. And for those of you who are listening, thank you for sticking with it. We are here. This is the Even Better podcast. We were talking with Kim Gratny of Full Circle Creative Coaching, and she was talking with us about 5 ways to rethink leadership through the lens of serving. With thinking before speaking, when you ask, see it through, actively observe with your eyes, ears, and mind, slow down to speed up, and avoid self-preservation. All just really great ways to stop and think about the other in the conversation and in the relationship building and in leadership. So on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we hope that the rest of your day is even better. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.